everyone. Joining me now is a very special lady. I'm very excited to talk to her. She was actually in a position that many of us would want to be in, although she handled it so calm and so cool. She was very collected. I think if it was me talking to the Prime Minister, I would have gone a bit bananas. But I'm going to introduce you to Freedom Convoy lawyer Eva Chippyak in just a moment. But I do want to, what we're going to talk about is just to remind people that from October 13th to December 2nd, we had a public order emergency commission go on. And we don't want people to forget how important that was and how important that is to put back in the forefront of your mind, because things are still happening. It is not over. But first of all, let's have a little refresher from last year.
We have all suffered in our own unique way because of the pandemic, the virus, the sickness, the lockdowns, the job losses, loss of livelihood, the mandates, and mental health. On the first day of this public order emergency inquiry, Commissioner Rouleau, you said uncovering the truth is an important goal. When difficult events occurred that impact the lives of Canadians, the public has the right to know what happened.
Indeed we do. Indeed we do. And so joining me now is Eva Chippyak. Hello and welcome.
Hi, thank you. It's so nice to be with you.
It's so nice to meet you. I have to tell you that when you addressed the Prime Minister during the commission, I was screaming and cheering because you brought so much heart and so much intensity to questioning him. Can I ask you, before we get into what we're going to talk about, what was that like? Were you nervous at all?
Yeah, of course. I was nervous. It was my first day up on that stage, let's call it. It's not typically how a lawyer does their job on a national stage, the way it was set up. But as the clip showed, it was meant to be like that for transparency. And honestly, I wasn't nervous for the Prime Minister. I was nervous for the millions of Canadians I was representing. That was where my thoughts were. That's who I was there for. And that's where that emotion came from. So that was all I was thinking about. You know, the Prime Minister was there, but it was really on behalf of the millions of Canadians that just felt so hurt and unheard for years now.
Hurt and unheard, absolutely. And that was when you addressed him, you addressed all that by telling stories and anecdotes that brought the emotion, that what we were all feeling. And you talked about people lining up on the overpasses. Those are all things we want to say to his face. And you were able to say that to his face. And that was remarkable.
Thank you. Like I said, I was humbled to do it and really honored to be part of the team to be able to do that.
So before we get into the latest news, can we break down a little bit of what you thought about the commission? First of all, you know, we hear so much that our institutions have gone so corrupt lately, but we have to have faith that the law will supersede sort of misconduct or what have you. What were your thoughts of Justice Rouleau?
So Justice Rouleau, you know, it's a very unique role, and it was an incredibly intense timeline for anyone, especially Commissioner Rouleau, who had the role of keeping it all together. And, you know, he had a huge team of staff behind him, and I think like 20 lawyers. So it's not like he was doing it on his own. I honestly believe he was a little bit overwhelmed at times, and at the same time too, I think most Canadians, you know, if they were looking at mainstream media, had a very different view of what went on in Ottawa. And I think that at a minimum, when any of the protesters took the stage and gave evidence, is that really what you saw was the opposite of terrorists or racists or extremists. These were honest, hardworking Canadians that were just not happy with their government.
When I go to rallies, when I talk to people, we are the Canadians. We are the real Canadians. And anybody who can't see that it's us, we're speaking up for us.
An OPP officer, so the Ontario Provincial Police, they were trying to profile the protesters, and they couldn't do it. They're like, their grandparents and, former nurses and lawyers and truckers, and they just couldn't profile the protesters because they were just regular Canadians. So it goes to your point. We actually got evidence about that from the police authorities. And the second thing you mentioned, you started with, we can't imagine that our institutions are so corrupt. And one thing I've been saying, and it was so clear, and it doesn't do me proud as a Canadian to say this, but what I saw and was clear is that it is run very incompetently. And that is not something I'm proud to say, but it was so many different levels of government, so many police authorities in Ottawa. And it was, for the first 5 weeks, it was like pointing the finger. You should have done it. You did this. You didn't give us resources. We need more resources.
I find that interesting that you said that you saw so much disorganization and pointing fingers and da 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 da. And I'll tell you something. Anybody who watched that commission, we could see that. That's the transparent thing, is that plain as day, we could see our government, the way they spoke, and you could really see that inauthenticity. Whereas all the lawyers came to play. Okay, not came to play, but they came prepared, despite having to swim upstream with redacted information. Can you tell me your take on how, boy, oh boy, the convoy lawyers have to be perfect?
So number one, I'm glad that it was that transparent to the Canadian public, that there was just a lot of inefficiencies in government. Incompetence really is the word that comes loud and clear. And so I'm so happy, at least on a national scale. It's not good, but at least we know there's a problem, and hopefully we can move forward to fixing it. And the second thing is that I want to talk specifically about the lawyers for the federal government, because they're the ones that were causing all the other parties the issue, in my opinion. It's the federal government that has to justify its actions at this inquiry. That was the purpose of the inquiry, is to show that they can show their actions were justified. But they're the ones that came to the table, to the inquiry, with late disclosure and incredibly redacted. What was troubling, and it landed on the Freedom Convoy, Freedom Corp lawyers, our group, is to rattle the cage a little bit about that and demand that the commission, because it's not for us to be the ones asking about it. This is meant to be not an adversarial process. And the commissioner said that the first day. This is an inquiry. This is a truth-seeking process. So the commission had deadlines of when the documents were due, but the government went way past it. They were putting in evidence the last week after ministers had already testified. And we're like, come on, commission, this is your job to manage this commission, not ours. And it landed on our group to do it, which is unfortunate. Instead of the truth-seeking process, we had to battle it a bit more than we.
Yeah. That says a lot, though. Oh, well, we can be incompetent and we can come unprepared and we can give you redacted documents. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, but it does matter. That's the point. It matters. This is a legal process. This is a commission. This is a hearing.
And again, for Canadians, it's just really sad to see who's paying these federal lawyers? We are, and paralegals. And I was in another case federally, and the judge kind of had enough from the federal government, because it was same kind of thing. And this is a tactic the federal government and government agencies do all the time. They're so big. But the judge in that case said, "You are the largest law firm in Canada." And I was like, thank you. And that's something the commissioner could have done. He said, you have more resources than this whole room combined. Let's not use your excuses that, well, we're doing the best that we can. Again, the commission was set up for the federal government to prove that the Emergencies Act was justified. So they should have been the first ones with their documents.
Yes. They should be ready to go. Not hemming and hawing and toing and froing like they all were doing.
We're doing our best. One thing, I'm just going to mention it because it was so hard to talk about everything. But, our group presented, even Keith Wilson, so he gave evidence because we were so intimately involved in what was going on in Ottawa. But we put in our text messages and things like that. But we did it so that people can actually understand them. You know, you had to screenshot every message because there was no like easy app to do it. But we put it in one PDF so that it flowed like a conversation. Most people don't know this. What the federal government did, and there were text messages from, you know, all over the place. It was one screenshot per PDF. And that was one document, exhibit number 7300073BBB. Then you go to the next document and it's a completely unrelated document. Then the next document is the text message that should follow the first one. And so it was just a big garbage dump of documents. Like, it was so obvious that they were not doing it for a transparency at all, because they did everything they absolutely.
Oh my God. That's either incompetence or doing it on purpose, because part of the COVID whole schmozzle is being confused. Is it, do I have it? Is this asymptomatic nonsense? Can I cross the border? Can I not cross the border? What do I need? They just want to keep everybody confused all the time. And
yeah,
so
true.
By them doing those text messages like that in different documents, they know the lawyer has to call up the different document. That's shady.
Totally. And like, we were battling an uphill battle the whole time, and then like the fact that we actually emerged alive, it's just.
When you were actually addressing the prime minister and they were talking about the trucks moving and what have you, as soon as you almost got him to answer, the Mr. what's his name, Brian Gover, the lawyer, the government would chirp up and go, "Oh no, almost like, you know what it reminded me of, like a mommy stepping in for the child. Like a daddy stepping in for the child, and you're like, can you answer the question? What do you think of him jumping in all the time?
Well, yeah, you know, that's what a lawyer will do to protect his client. Like any lawyer will do that. And he did it twice, and it was annoying, obviously. But thankfully, in that case, Commissioner Rouleau said, no, you could answer the question, and he did. So I do credit him for that. And I think that was good, because the objection was just how I phrased the question. And so I could phrase it however I want. He's not directing me at how I'm supposed to ask the question, but he just didn't like that the way I was asking it. And in the end, he had to answer it. So
he was very scared that the prime minister, well, that there would be an answer, because if there was an answer, it's still, none of this is justified. And that's the whole point, that none of this is justified. That went quite viral with Justin Trudeau. What did you think of that? Where basically he was denying that he had called us misogynist, racist people, but you got him there.
People have testified in this inquiry referencing your widely published comments and calling the unvaccinated racists and misogynists. And we have heard testimony in this inquiry about how some of your officials wanted to label protesters as terrorists. Would you agree with me that one of the most important roles of a prime minister is to unite Canadians and not divide them by engaging in name calling?
I did not call people who were unvaccinated names. I highlighted there's a difference between people who are hesitant to get vaccinated for any range of reasons and people who deliberately spread misinformation that puts at risk the life and health of their fellow Canadians.
Well, it was funny because the question wasn't about whether or not you called us names. Like, that wasn't the question, and it went there. But the question was, like you said, as a leader, do you think it's your role to be dividing or uniting your citizens? And you know how else is he going to answer that? You know, so he went with the name calling bit, and the fact that he said I never called anybody names. Well, we saw video and time after time of where he did. So
I'm an Indian woman, right? So he's calling me a misogynist, racist, right? You know.
Well, that's the most troubling part, really, for me, because I was at the Freedom Convoy. I was there in Ottawa, and I've never seen so much diversity and unity and peace and people working together of no matter different color, background, or sexual orientation. And like, honestly, that must really hurt if you were a supporter that was one of the people that you know, like they're suggesting you're a bigot against yourself. Like it doesn't even make sense.
It doesn't even make any sense. They want them all. But on the news, on my old station, we will pick the shots to make the truckers look like the rowdy kind of insurgents. Yeah, you may have a beer drinking, leather jacket tattooed guy with a beard. So what? I like those people. You might have a guy with a turban. So what? I like those people too. We're all Canadians. You'll have people like me, people like you. Come on. You know, we can all see that, but the news didn't show you that.
Yeah. And it really even united people that maybe were a little bit not comfortable with other people. But when you bring people together with a common cause like that, there's nothing that can divide you. And that was the beauty about what happened in Ottawa. And there was no denying it.
But one of my favorite clips was this one right here.
And that means all Canadians, including government leaders, to hold the executive branch of Canada to account. If there ever was a time for a prime minister to step down, now is that time.
Yes, girl. Now is that time. How does he even show his face?
Well, if you look at what's going on, the amount of security that man has, and then you compare it to other leaders and they're walking around freely, that must be embarrassing for him, obviously. What a challenge. Like I think of the security people around him, and I just wonder how much they can take to, like, how much hate and vitriol from, like, I'd walk away if I was them. I'd be like, I don't want to protect this man. But
what was the vibe like when you were questioning the prime minister? What could you feel?
oh, it was so quiet. It was dead silent. And like, we'd been working so hard. I was a little bit coming off of a cold too. So I'm like trying just to get through it. But I was like, can somebody make some noise so it's not quiet? And then it was like, now is going to come in the emotion from the Canadian. We knew he wouldn't answer. He's a politician. He's not going to tell us what we want to hear. So we wanted to make it uncomfortable for him.
Yes. And I was also not impressed with anything from Chrystia Freeland. No.
Yeah, she was honestly very, I had to walk out a few times. Well, it seemed like we weren't even in an inquiry for the Emergencies Act. There was more discussion about electric vehicle batteries than there was about the Emergencies Act. The commission should have been making sure that we're talking about what's important, the Emergencies Act and the reasons justifying it. If you're going to talk about the economy, that's one thing, fine. But to go off for an hour about electric vehicle batteries and the war in Ukraine, that has nothing to do with the issue at hand. And the commission should have done a much better job about regulating that conversation, and they let that go.
They let that go because she's the deputy prime minister, but you're absolutely right. And the hypocrisy of them talking about the economy when they were absolutely fine to shut that border down for 2 years, and they're worried about the protest. I mean, that it makes me want to throw stuff at my screen when they say, oh, you shut down the economy. You shut down everyone's business willy-nilly and you didn't care. How dare they say things like this?
So the evidence, and this is incredibly important, the evidence from the Finance Committee showed that there was no dip, limited impact. And if you really think about it, obviously it's not Ottawa, because that's not where the economy is, flourishing. Those are bureaucrats, and they were getting paid and everything was fine when they went home. But they really tried to push that narrative the most with Windsor and the Ambassador Bridge. Coots a little bit when you actually heard evidence too about what was going on in Windsor. It was a limited amount of trucks, and it was a very short-lived time. And really, if you just use common sense, how much can 5 days impact the national economy? If it does, we're in serious trouble as a country. And clearly, it doesn't even make common sense. And like you pointed out, for 2 years, if you're shutting down the economy, putting in vax passports, putting in Arrive, which other countries don't use and don't understand, and they're trying to come into the country, that's going to impact your economy.
Well, that's very good evidence, and that's very good information. And we all know that they're absolute hypocrites to even bring that up. And I hate the way they say illegal blockades, the illegal blockades. No, it's a protest. And we are protesting because we're at the point where we want our government to do something. So now, I mean, people can go back and watch YouTube clips online or clips on Rumble. And I don't think I can go without saying how much we all enjoy Brendan Miller. And,
well, me too. It was also always the spiciest time and the best time. We were calling it Miller time because he's an excellent litigator. And when you have 10 minutes, and that's one thing too, I wanted to say that's not, you don't cross-examine any party in 10 minutes. So the fact that lawyers were doing that, like I have to commend them all. That was incredibly hard. And, he was going through that almost every day.
I don't like that time limits on an inquiry, or you should have more sufficient time. When they, in TV, we interview people for 3 minutes on network TV. So we'll do like these, we'll get it in and get it on 3 minutes, right? Which I always is like, what is the point of that? But whatever, that's how they run their clock. But in a hearing, I don't think you should run a clock like that and be chirping about, oh, we're out of time.
Yeah.
So now what's happening is that on Twitter, I follow you on Twitter. You've highlighted that the feds refuse, bringing us up to today, refused to release the legal opinion they claim justified the use of the Emergencies Act. And the POEC is giving Trudeau and his cabinet a secret report on February 6th and Parliament, and the public get the report on February 20th. So what is going on there?
So the first point, the legal opinion, is that the government gave us a document that said Department of Justice and the rest blank. And that was the legal opinion that justified invoking the Emergencies Act. They kept that hidden from the Canadians. And I think that's wrong. And I think Canadians should demand it. But the second one, which has gotten a bit more traction, is that there is a report that's due to Cabinet February 6th. And I'll explain that a little bit in that. Through the Emergencies Act, the commissioner is required. There's an inquiry that has to happen, and the commissioner must provide that report within 360 days of the revocation of the Emergencies Act. But in order to make the commission, the cabinet has to issue an order in council. So they did that April 25th. And that order in council also had a few additional requirements of the commission to look at the leaders, the blockades, funding sources, crowdsourcing. None of that is included in the Emergencies Act. The Emergencies Act is pretty clear that it's about the government action, not the protesters, but the government action. But another part of the order in council is that it says that they want the governor and council, which is essentially the cabinet, is demanding, basically directing the commission to provide them with a report by February 6th. So that's 2 weeks in advance of Parliament getting it.
Oh, well, that's not that is not transparent. That's just like, you don't do that. Here, you get this first, and then you might get it, and you don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah. So you don't see that in law. You, like, when a judge makes a decision, he will tell you that the decision is ready, and then you hear it or you get it at the same time. And they could have released it to all of at least the lawyers so that we had a look at it and everyone's on the same page about it. But this early release, 2 weeks to cabinet, who's, again, the whole point of it is to look at whether there was reason to justify the Emergencies Act. It's very strange to be getting that report back to them.
Is it possible that once you get your hands on it, it will also have redacted information? They shouldn't do that because you're the team of lawyers.
Yeah, I don't think it would have redacted versions. So the least sinister thing I could imagine is that at least the government has 2 weeks in advance to spin it. They're going to know what they want to say, and then everybody else is going to be reacting. The more sinister thing that can happen is that they could make requests of the commission to change it. But I don't know. We don't know if that's going to happen or if that's the reason for it. They could say this, this wasn't right, or this doesn't make sense. This is going to look a bit off for us. So maybe you could just change that up a little bit. I don't know.
Oh, that's not good. We don't like that. No, that's not the way. No, I don't like it.
Well, especially too, because this isn't just a little act. Wasn't just They shut down people's bank accounts.
Yeah.
They beat people up on the streets of Ottawa. Like, we need to know whether or not this was justified, whether their actions were justified, because they really went above and beyond with this. And that's what the Emergencies Act is. And that's why there is this inquiry embedded in the Emergencies Act, because this is not just something you willy-nilly throw around.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So what can we do about this now? What do you encourage Canadians to do? I think sometimes people think they don't want to write to their MPs, but if you have 20 people saying, I will not vote you back in if you don't do something.
Well, that's what, maybe it's not the most sexy thing, but, and writing emails or calling, it's pretty private and nobody knows. So, like, I've been suggesting people go to social media, like, then it's public. Maybe there'll be a bit more of a call to action if you see that there's this many Canadians talking about it. And the other thing is, this is really early, but so many people were already saying, the commission doesn't have teeth anyway. It's not good. I want to land Trudeau in jail, or he needs to resign. The commission doesn't have the power to do that anyway. It only reviews what was presented and then it makes recommendations. So it's on the Canadian people to take, like, if, for example, let's say the commission says it was not justified for Trudeau to invoke the Emergencies Act, then what? Canadians need to pull up their socks, contact their MPs, contact the leaders and say, if this wasn't justified, there's absolutely no reason that this man should be in power. He made a tremendous mistake. It was found out by the commission. So maybe just starting to have a dialogue with our elected officials. We've given them a pretty nice break for years, not just during COVID, but before. We're pretty apathetic. And I think it's time for Canadians to really step up and get involved with politics, get involved in civic action, and start dialoguing with your elected officials. We can't just
we can't let this go. I mean, we've all been guilty of that, just sort of sitting back. But now, no, we're not, because they're doing everything to us. Gas prices, the handgun, your firearms, you're this, you're that. They're giving money to Ukraine. They're just slowly trying to take everything from people. And if people don't realize and wake up that they are trying to make us literally have nothing, then we will. So that's the thing. And we don't want these people in power. So you're right. Everybody has to get together and say something.
Like, we need to start that dialogue. I think it's imperative.
Yeah, everything's got to get fixed, reset, but reset our way. If we were running this country, we'd have everything right. The supply chain, the deliveries, the trucks, the groceries, the gas.
Well, at least we tried. We tried. We tried better.
I don't know. I think you and I could probably do it.
Let's go.
We fix this in 3 months.
Yeah.
Give us 3 months. I would be done. Anyway, but where can people find you?
Well, I'm pretty active on Twitter right now and TikTok. Just the videos are fun. So those would be the places to find me more professionally.
Is it Eva? What's your handle?
No, it's forever Eva 79.
Okay, cool. Okay, I'll put a link in there and I'll put some other links in there. And listen, and we need people like you with this legal background to help us. And all of you, the lawyers that participated in this hearing and that are fighting on the right side, you have my heartfelt thanks and appreciation.
Well, thank you again. Super humbled to be doing the work. And I could not imagine doing anything else. So thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Eva, for talking to me today. And we'll see you soon.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.